to the Overcoming Adversity podcast, where it's all about a transformational growth and having a resilient mindset. I'm your host, Michael Allison. Oftentimes many people get incarcerated or get arrested for wrongful things. Today we have on the show Mr. Tony Viola, and he was wrongfully incarcerated. He's also a business owner as well, and he's here to tell us his story of going through this type of adversity and how he overcame it. I can't wait to get into this show. Let's go. Welcome to the Overcoming Adversity podcast, Tony. Thank you so much for joining me, brother. How you doing, man?
I'm great. Thanks for the opportunity to be on your show, and congratulations on all you've accomplished too.
Absolutely, man. Thank you, man. As we were talking backstage, I was just thinking about some of the things that you've been through. You had the opportunity to grow a business, but that came with some heartaches, some pain, some adversities, and things like that. And I really want to just dive into it as I know a lot of our listeners have shared some comments and shared some things where they have some family members been through some things in their business life and things like that. But you've actually been through that and faced it. So can you tell us a little bit about your story and how it has impacted your life?
Sure. Well, we'll talk about starting and growing the business first, I guess. My high
Right.
school sweetheart, Katrina Rose, she was a photographer and she loved old houses and the architecture. And I'm from Cleveland, Ohio, an old industrial city. So back in the day, you could buy houses for $3,000 or $5,000. And so I was about 21 years old, and Trina said, we should buy some of these houses. And there's all these people that need work. We can hire people, sort of this idealistic idea that we could start a business and make Cleveland great and change the community forever. And so we did. And if we actually thought about it, we didn't have any money. We didn't have a lot of experience. We didn't really have construction expertise. We probably wouldn't have moved forward, but we just thought, hey, let's just give it a chance. If we don't try, we'll never know if we could be successful. And in business, the key is you got to have a team. You got to have colleagues. And so we were blessed to have really talented people that help us build this business up. So if you fast forward 15 years, we built this company to well over 100 team members and thought that we were a very dynamic and innovative, scrappy real estate business competing with the big companies.
So, Tony, you had the opportunity to start this business and took a chance, and then you guys built it up to scale it to the point of getting over 100 employees. What kind of strategies did you guys put in place to scale so fast, and get started like streamlining things to become much more agile?
Right. Well, part of it is you have to be humble and you have to let the marketplace take you in different directions. So we thought that buying and selling houses was the way to make money, but it turned out that our marketing and sales experience is what people wanted us to do because that was more unique. And there was lots of construction experience, but not as much sales and marketing skills, particularly in the older neighborhoods of the community where people needed a hand to learn how to get their credit presentable to get a loan to buy a house. So, and then later on, one of our clients asked us to conduct real estate auctions. And I said, well, we've never done that. I'm not an auction company. And this guy said, well, we'll hire you to do it. So go figure out how to do it. So one key in business is it doesn't really matter what I think or what I want to do. The market will pull you in directions. If you sit around trying to think about how to make money, you won't make any money. But if you create value for people, the guy that invented the iPhone, is going to be plenty successful financially. So part of it is to have your ear to the ground, be humble, and listen to the market, listen to the customers, and serve the needs of the market that actually exists, not necessarily what you think should be the products or services of your company.
So when you got into the real estate industry, did you say, I'm going to segment to this particular market or this particular niche or anything like that? Or did you guys say, let's work on single family homes, duplex homes, certain types of neighborhoods, when you guys decided just to jump all into it?
Well, we really jumped all in without a clear strategy, but over time we quickly learned that, we just didn't have the capital to buy apartment buildings and buy houses that needed to be renovated. So we found that it was best to be sales and marketing folks. So if we found some property that was very inexpensive, we could call another investor and we became realtors, so we could legally do this, and
That's it.
we could earn a big commission or a big fee. So we learned that there was other people doing things that what we wanted to do, but we could service them. And the old story is that the three-letter word for what does a wealthy person do when they could do something but don't want to do it? They pay. So we found that there was people willing to pay us to do things they didn't want to do. Could they show an apartment and lease it out? Sure, but they paid us to do it. Could they paint the building or clean it out after somebody moved? Sure, but they hired us to do it. So essentially, we provided services that companies were willing to pay for. And so that's how we started finally getting over the hump and generating positive cash flow, which was critical because in the real estate business, you need nice offices, you need a website, you need marketing expenditures, and you've got to generate operating income to be able to invest. And in real estate brokerage, which is what the business we were in, remember the sales team could go somewhere else. I mean, they could leave our company and go to Remax or Keller Williams or one of these big companies, and they would if they thought they could make more money there. So not only were we trying to satisfy customers, the end customer that was actually engaging in a transaction, but we wanted to make sure we were the best place to work for the sales team. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to grow. So to attract good people, you've got to have a good compensation system and a good marketing system so they generate leads and income. People might think I'm a nice guy, but no one's going to work at our shop if they could make more money across the street or down the road.
I love it. As you're telling me that, I was thinking when I was running the painting company down here in South Florida, we would obviously go out with our sales team and we'll get different houses to paint, but we would partner with other people, vendors and contractors to offer multiple different services that could lead to different streams of revenue within the business. So I love the idea and the concept of what you guys are doing, man.
Right. And as our brokerage part of our business grew, we sort of made like a Chinese menu where you could get, you charge less and do less, or you could charge more and do more. And so part of it was find out what the customers need. If they want to upload pictures and if they don't want you to do open houses, or if it's a developer that's building a condo and they want to staff a sales center, you've got to provide the services on the scale that they want. Now, what you don't want is to do a lot of work and charge a little. But it's okay to do a little work and charge a little. So you're exactly right. And that menu of services or that full service option for customers is an important key because we have to serve the market needs. And so finding the need and then serving it is key.
So I always ask some of our guests that come on here, the profession that you were in or you got into, was that always your dream or something like that, or did you just fall into that? Like, what was it like for you growing up? And did you have like aspirations of getting into this particular field, knowing that it would pay off someday?
Well, I grew up in Cleveland when all the steel mills were closing and the car factories were closing and our community was decimated. So I was interested in business from the standpoint of ultimately, and it's not only business, but business can play a part in a role of a community's redevelopment. I mean, if there's not economic opportunities for people, they're going to leave and go somewhere else. And the young people particularly won't stay, and we won't attract college graduates from elsewhere throughout the country or high-tech businesses. And so there was a little bit of a mission where I did want to come back to Cleveland and start a business here and contribute to the community. But the real estate, we got into it because, as I said, Trina was a photographer and was so interested in the architecture and how cool the properties were and preserving properties. So it wasn't like we were financial engineers that said, well, this is the best market versus other markets on cash flow metrics or something like that. She just thought the houses were cool. So, I mean, and so so we thought, you know what? And it didn't take a lot of money to get into it because the properties were cheap. And then to be in the sales part of the business, you need a cell phone and like a pen, so we entered a business that had a huge barrier to entry with large capital requirements. So I was interested in business all the time and hoped to do it, but exactly what or how, I wasn't totally sure. But as we got into the real estate business, it does get in your blood and you do become very interested in it. And one last thing on renovating properties, there is something really cool about taking before and after pictures and seeing what something looked like before, whether we were renovating or other partners were doing it and we were just doing the sales. It's something amazing to see a community revitalized or a building that was dilapidated. Now families are living there. So some professions you may not be able to have that visual before and after. So it was very rewarding and very interesting to see that. And then lastly, too, one last thought is that a lot of poor people stay poor because they never own any assets. They punch a time clock, work really hard, don't get ahead. Someone who's paying a lot of rent, for them to own their own home and build equity over time, that's a huge change in their life. So we did have the missionary zeal of hey, we're going to help people, working people, get ahead and own a house instead of paying rent. Most of the folks had a lower cost of a mortgage payment than they were actually paying in rent.
Wow, absolutely, man. I love that concept and love the attitude of making a change and making an impact. I wanted to touch on something you just said and just agreeing with you. You know, taking before and after pictures is just like a Google review,
Right.
and it's like a stamp of approval saying this is what we did before, this is what we could do. So I do concurrently agree with you on that. Tony, you know, when I introduced the podcast, I mentioned that you did face some adversities in your life and in your business and things like that. So knowing that you had gained this level of success and notoriety within your business, it did come with some adversity. Can you talk about some challenges that you face while as a business owner?
Well, as a business owner, and then later I'll tell you how our lives were shattered in an
All
instant
right.
by the government. But as a business owner, um, Trina, the young lady who was like my high school sweetheart who helped us start the business, she and her mom were killed in a plane crash.
Mm.
And if your viewers or listeners want to Google TWA 800, you can read all about what happened to that flight. But Trina's mom, Sandy Hazelton, was a high school French teacher and always wanted to go back to France. And so after Trina graduated from college, there was a mother-daughter trip that was ended in this awful plane crash. So that was devastating. And the company really almost went out of business after that because I just didn't really, who would want to do real estate, right? I mean, but it's at some point I said, well, Trina planted a seed. The business can create jobs. And she had this idealistic view that we could create opportunities and do good things. And so it sort of became a little bit of a mission to continue the work that she really encouraged us to start. And also, part of it was to just do something productive. I mean, you could sit around and drink all day and be sad. And Trina's brother, John, basically told me, look, this is not what my mom and what Trina would want us to be doing. It's time to, we can have them in our hearts and we can grieve, but let's be productive. And so I sort of threw myself into the business. I was probably the best realtor ever for a couple of years because I worked I worked almost to crowd out the sadness. And so that was a very challenging time. And then ultimately the business got rolling again. And so we were able to keep Trina in our hearts and her ideas, even though it was very different to be there without her. She was a part of the beginning of the business.
Right.
So that was the single biggest challenge. There were other challenges along the way, but the thing is, if you have a good team, you can always sit around and overcome it. We would literally go and order a pizza and a pitcher of beer at some dive bar, and we would brainstorm, okay, this went wrong. How do we correct it? What do we do differently? So I guess if you have an approach that mistakes are common in business, failure is good in the sense that it can teach you other things. So we just kept thinking of the old Teddy Roosevelt saying about the man in the arena is going to make mistakes and come up short, but at least the people are in the arena trying rather than sitting on the sidelines criticizing. I mean, it's easy to criticize others and say, well, you should have done this or you could have done that or this didn't work or that didn't work. But our crew was of the opinion that, hey, we're going to stub our toe. We're going to make some mistakes. Let's not get mad. We'll pick up the pieces and adjust. And so over time, those series of mistakes also we had a series of good things. And so we were able to build on the positive things and move forward. One little example was all of the offices that our company had were in buildings that we helped other people manage. So
Right.
we didn't actually pay rent. So we had all these real estate offices with really low overhead so we could grow our business. So we learned, because we didn't have a lot of capital, that actually became a strength later on because we were scrappy, we were aggressive and low cost. So it's true that you can take lemon and make lemonade.
I love the concept of you utilizing and leveraging that relationship and leveraging that part of business. That was smart. That was extremely smart. Tony, if you can, I heard something key, and I know some of our business owners that are listening to this podcast could really benefit if you could talk a little bit more about this. So you went through something no one could imagine dealing with, right? You had a lost business partner, and you could have shut the business down. You could have made some other decisions in regards to continuing with the business, but you chose not to. You chose to move forward. But what it sounds like that kept the business moving, even if you took a week off, a day off, or something like that, you had systems in place, you had processes in place, and you had procedures in place.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about how important that is as a business owner to have those type of SOPs in place?
Right. Well, first of all, you want to hire people smarter than you, okay, which I always try to do. And you also want to hire people that have very different skills,
Hmm.
because if you have everybody good at sales and marketing, but nobody's good at administration or nobody's good at construction, we're not going to be successful. So part of it was to hire people that have different skills, which also then creates different perspectives and a diversity of opinions and
Absolutely.
ideas, which is really good. So you stay away from groupthink. But it is important, one of the guys that one of our first customers, he used to have to, he had a sign in his office and it said in, and sometimes he would flip it and say on. And I said, Stan, his name was Stan Marzell. I said, Stan, what does that mean? And he said, well, sometimes I work in the business, meaning I'm driving the truck or I'm showing an apartment. But sometimes I work on the business, meaning strategy, or how do I make the business more profitable or take it to the next level, or how do we have a better website? And so he said, you don't want to get so sucked into the business that you just become a total line employee where you're almost not even thinking of the big picture. Because when you have colleagues, you have to have some strategy. You have to have some sense of mission and opportunities of where the company should go. So I guess there's a fine line between working in the business and on the business. But yes, if you want to be a megalomaniac and you want all the glory and all the credit and you want to be the key person at the business, you're not going to be successful because you can't work 24/7 and you will wear yourself out. Our business grew because our colleagues helped us. And the other thing too is, I don't care how smart somebody is, the smartest person you've ever met in your life is not as smart as a group of people. A group of people working together is always smarter than whoever the smartest person thinks they're so smart. So part of what we had in our business was a very vibrant discussion about if we were going to do something. Very rarely did I just make a decision. We would talk about stuff. Hey, I'm thinking we might open another office, or I'm thinking we may change our website completely, or I'm thinking of bringing out this new product. We would discuss that with our crew and refine our strategy and get input from others. So I think we were no fancy company. This was a small company, but as a small business, you definitely want people that can step in, people that are versatile, that can do a multitude of things. And you just don't want to be a megalomaniac CEO or a glory-seeking CEO. People won't stay there. People have a choice and they will go somewhere else if you hog up all the glory and you're the one. I mean, one guy told me one time that I was having lunch with him and people were calling his phone the whole time. And I was like, what was that call? And he said, well, the guy wanted to know what to do when the UPS man came. I said, you just give him the box. Hey, we need to ship this. So I was like, I never get calls like that. Our crew would know and they wouldn't even think to call me. And so that was the other saying we used to have, which is better to make a mistake than be paralyzed and wait for Tony to come back or whatever. So part of it is empowering people and having a good crew. You cannot grow a business without colleagues that are smart and intelligent and driven.
I remember when I was in the Marine Corps, we used to say things like we could ask questions later, but do what we got to do first and then ask questions later, or
Right.
fail first and then we could course
Right.
correct and things like that.
Right.
Tony, you know, being a businessman and you were successful, and following that though, you faced some personal challenges, and it affected you massively. We had talked about when we came into the show of being arrested or being in prison, and that was a life changing impact for you. Can you talk a little bit about, as much as you can, about this situation with our audience?
It was the shock of a life. I never thought we were doing anything wrong or improper. We were in the real estate business, realtors, yard signs in the front yard, property management, construction services. One day, the FBI and the local prosecutors, through this task force in the Justice Department, kicked the door down and raided our company and said that I stole $46 million in the nation's largest mortgage fraud case, and that I had been tricking banks like JP Morgan Chase and Citigroup and others into making no money down mortgage loans. And I mean, the day of the raid, it was just an absolute life-changing event. Our lives were shattered in an instant. I remember the police were there taking computers out. I asked, what company are you looking for? Because they were screaming, we're looking for mortgage files. Where are your mortgage files? We're not a mortgage company. We didn't do mortgages. And law enforcement, you know, they have an obey or die attitude. And they said, look, we know you have mortgage files. And I said, we don't. We're a real estate company. And this FBI agent named Jeff Kassouf said that I was making it really hard on myself. So this whole thing was almost surreal. I was accused of something. I was accused of something that was just factually incorrect. The government, in these indictments, it says that I own a title company and a mortgage company, but we were a real estate business. We didn't own those businesses. And I was shocked that the United States Attorney's Office and the local prosecutors in Ohio had gone on TV, raid, televised press conferences, breaking news, and they really didn't even know what companies I owned. I was shocked at the incompetence of these folks, and I refused to say no comment. After they raided our company and hauled everything out of there, I went down to address the reporters, and there was a gaggle of journalists, and I said, look, we are not a mortgage company. We are realtors. I did not steal $46 million. And there was no need for this raid and guns and SWAT teams. All the government had to do was call. We would have given them our records or files or cooperated with any inquiry. So this was a media circus uncorked. And what I learned the hard way was, once the government says something on television, there's never, ever, ever, ever any situation in which they would ever retract what they said or say they're sorry or move on. Admitting a mistake is just not something they do. So sadly, for the next several years, once the prosecutors, this guy Mark Bennett, who's being disbarred now, by the way, which is good, and this other guy Dan Caceres, so I think he's next. These guys realized that I didn't own the mortgage company they thought I did, and people kept going and telling them I was innocent, and they started engaging in epic misconduct to avoid admitting that they were wrong and, quote, win the case. That's what they want to do. They want to win. And there's a lot of law enforcement testosterone and all riled up. Mm-hmm. I had no criminal history. I'd never been involved with any type of crimes or anything. And I was absolutely shocked to watch not only everything that I had built my whole life be destroyed, my reputation was destroyed, but the government, I was just shocked. People would go and tell them I was innocent, and they would say, we're going to charge you. We're going to indict you. I had a customer named Brian Stark, and he told them I was innocent. And the FBI said, well, we're going to raid your company. You better stop doing business with this guy. Yeah. Let me tell you, when it says United States of America versus Tony Viola, I can assure you that means the government will use all of its authority, all of its power, every tool in the toolkit, legal or illegal, to win the case. And then real quick, since I supposedly stole $46 million, one way to defend yourself is to say, well, you know, let's find these records from these mortgage companies I don't own. The government had raided like 15 companies one day. And then one day, Mark Bennett comes to court and claims that they lost the computers they seized in these televised raids from the companies I don't own. So it made it very, well, really impossible to defend myself, because one defense would be, look, I never got 1 cent. So if you guys are having a mortgage fraud trial about millions of missing dollars, I'm just going to sit here and read USA Today's sports section and let you guys, because I didn't get a penny. But we couldn't do that defense because the government had, what we later found out, that they had actually destroyed the computers. So the misconduct, I mean, the irony of my case is, and this is true of 1,100 prosecutions here locally through this task force, the irony is, or the shocking thing is, or the sad thing is for America, is that none of us had engaged in any, there was no criminal activity. We were just realtors selling houses until the government started investigating, in which case the prosecutors started breaking the law and doing crazy things. Prosecutor Dan Caceres started a romantic relationship with one of the government witnesses in my case.
Wow.
And then we can talk briefly about Dawn Pasella, who was the whistleblower, how I was exonerated at the second trial. But I mean, the point was, I was in this morass where I knew I didn't own mortgage companies. Nobody wanted to listen to me inside the government. And our colleagues at our company were shocked, because they kept saying, well, Tony, I'm going to go down to the prosecutor's office. I'll tell them, I've worked for you for 10 years. I've worked for you for 15 years. One lady named Angelica Fry, she told me, Tony, I wouldn't work for you if you were ripping people off. I'm a single mom with 2 kids. I mean, I would go to some other real estate company. So, but as my colleagues approached the prosecutor's office, they were yelled at and said, you can't say Tony's innocent. Don't say anything like that. We'll indict you. I've sworn statements on my website from witnesses that were told, look, you're going to commit perjury. You're going to lie and say what we want you to say, or we're going to indict your wife and put your children in foster care tonight. I mean, that's literally what was going on in my case.
And get out of here.
It's
Wow.
unbelievable. Well, you don't have to believe what I'm saying. It's this free TonyViola.com website has an evidence.
That is crazy,
You can
Tony.
read all this yourself and see.
Tony, that is crazy, man. Tony, I wanted to touch on this, hearing that like your staff is willing to defend you and all of this is going against you. And now you sit up here trying to defend yourself, man. How were you dealing with this? Obviously, I could see that you built up the attitude of being resilient and fighting back against this, obviously knowing that you're innocent. Can you talk a little bit about you've built this company, you've been through a lot with this company, and now somebody is coming and trying to take all of this down that you built as a business owner, knowing all of the hard work, the grinding, the sweat, the equity, all that stuff that you put into this,
Sure.
and someone has just come in here and just trying to take all that down. I know that had to take a massive toll on you. Can you talk a little bit about what that was for you emotionally, mentally, and then also knowing that like you were taking care of like employees, so like this is a trickle down domino effect.
Sure.
Can you talk a little bit about that, man?
Sure. Well, first of all, it's awful because the government was not only destroying everything I worked for my entire life, but also
Right.
smashing my reputation. I mean,
Right.
Mark Bennett and Dan Caceres, these prosecutors were media hounds. I mean, I was in court one day and Dan Caceres almost ran over a lady in a wheelchair because there was a local news station setting up the cameras. So, I mean, they just wanted this publicity, but the effect of that was just pounding in the news media. And I would read this stuff and I would say, my God, if I wouldn't like Tony either if I just read this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, to just have everything you work for being destroyed is shocking. I did feel a tremendous sense of guilt because my colleagues, one lady had her car repossessed. I mean, she couldn't make the car payments because her income had gone down. Other people had to leave. They said, look, we have to leave. We don't want to, but I have to make a living. I have, tuition for my kids and I got to buy soccer uniforms and stuff. So it was, and the thing is, it dragged on for almost 3 years between the raid and the first trial was almost 3 years. So I wasn't in prison, but it was almost as bad because it was sort of a slow drip, drip, drip. And then again, I knew that what they were saying was factually false, but I felt like, you do feel powerless, that you can't do anything about it. But on the other hand, because Trina I think if her spirit wasn't sort of motivating me, I kept telling the lawyers, look, I'm not pleading guilty. I don't care. We started with idealism. We never took advantage of anybody as far as I know. And if we ever made mistakes in business, which we did, we tried to make it right.
Right.
So I said, and I'm not saying I'm right, and I'm not telling people to do this, but I told the attorneys and one judge I was able to speak, and I said, look, I'm not pleading guilty. They may ruin my life. They may imprison me forever, but I'm not pleading guilty. I wouldn't plead guilty and go to jail for an hour willingly. I absolutely will not. I will die there in 50 years if that's what it takes, but I am not. They may destroy my life and business, but I'm not going to make it easy for these people. So I just had this attitude that they can take their indictment and stick it where. How does the government not know what businesses I own? How does the Justice Department, you see these people, Merrick Garland, you see them, they're so pompous. They're so arrogant about the rule of law and all this
Right.
rubbish, but they don't even know basic facts, and they wouldn't even let me go down there with my accountant and my attorney. So the answer is it was awful to have my reputation destroyed, the business destroyed, and sort of was a slow motion burn over 3 years. It was awful. By the time I got to the trials, there was 2 trials. I lost, and then I was later acquitted. But I mean, even if I had quote won, I would have lost anyway, because by the time I showed up, I was exhausted, broke. I had no business anymore, no colleagues, no customers. So it was just a huge use of government power to smash realtors. I mean, it was just shocking to me. I was treated like a terrorist. I was prosecuted in state and federal court at the same time. It was hard to process. All I can tell you is Winston Churchill said, if you're going through hell, keep going, which is what I kept thinking. Well, if I can just get through today. But it was brutal. I wouldn't wish it on anybody.
No, Tony, I agree with you, man. I've seen some things in my lifetime with like how corrupted things could be, man. So I just totally could imagine what that was like. If if you could talk to us, man, what was that like going through in your hometown when it comes to your personal reputation? You were a businessman. You've been working with the entire community. You're going to stores, you're going to the mall, and all of a sudden you made mainstream news.
Yeah.
How are you able to
I
live with
mean,
that and deal with that?
right. I mean, I went literally in 1 minute from being sort of this friendly nerd, okay, this successful business guy, in 1 minute to this criminal that crashed the economy, stole $46 million, is responsible for all these foreclosures. The prosecutor said, if you see Tony Viola at a Starbucks with his briefcase and a muffin, that's
Oh,
not breakfast. That's a crime scene. Okay, this slick criminal, and so I mean, it's absolutely shocking. Just the instantaneous, just boom, from successful guy to criminal. And even if I was acquitted at trial, I think a lot of people would have said, well, maybe he's guilty, or maybe he had some slick lawyer and got off on some technicality. And then the other thing is, I had clients that said, listen, man, we can't have you collecting money for this apartment building. You supposedly stole millions of dollars. Our insurance company won't allow it. Our partners won't allow it. We're really sorry, man, but we're you're done. So I think the stain of that is not
wow.
something that you can ever get off. In fact, when I was at my second trial and I started winning, all of a sudden the journalists, poof, they weren't there anymore. So it's interesting. I asked one of the journalists from the local NPR station, I said, why aren't you guys covering? Oh, well, the U.S. attorney doesn't want it covered. And I said, are you guys serious? That sounds like a Soviet Union style. The government is telling the media what to do. And
Hmm.
so it was very shocking. I could never get in a word edgewise as I was being smashed. I mean, the local media was essentially stenographers for the prosecutor's office. They once in a while, they would put at the end of some long article, Viola denies the charges or denies all allegations, but they never hardly ever let me get in more than a couple of words. But the prosecutors were having press conferences and press releases. They put my name all over everything. It was very difficult.
So Tony, you were eventually exonerated and you were able to beat this. How were you able to do that? And how has that made a change in your life in regards to your outlook, the aspects, your mission, and all of these different things in life now, man?
Well, during the darkest times, I would say I was in prison for 10 years, and I would say there was two thoughts that would go through my mind. One was very high-minded and idealistic, and I would think, I'm Catholic, I have faith. I also would have a realization that, what, other people have been falsely accused. Other people have been treated unfairly. I'm not the only guy, in America that's like been screwed over. Like this, other people have suffered. So you get a little perspective on it, and then you have faith that nothing is forever, and whatever goes wrong on earth will be corrected, in heaven or later. Combined with the fact that in jail there's nothing else to do. So guys would say, why do you go to the law library, Tony? Why don't you give up? And I would say, well, listen, I'm going to go to the law library today. You tell me 12 hours from now what I missed. And I'd come back, okay, to the cell, and they would say, well, Richie did a Sudoku puzzle, and Joe wrote his girlfriend a letter. I'm like, okay, well, that doesn't seem too exciting. So, I mean, part of it was this combination of nothing else to do in there. And I had a lot of support. I had a really good private investigator. We kept getting information. My friends put that freetonyviola.com website, where my friends put that together when I was in prison to solicit leads and get information. So it was sort of a 1-2 punch of nothing else to do, long sentence, and a little bit of a mission too of saying this can't be uncorrected. I was exonerated, or I was acquitted at a second trial, but my first conviction we're still slogging through. I was released from prison 3 years early when the FBI admitted lying about evidence. But I won the second trial when a lady from the prosecutor's office named Dawn Pasella came forward and provided me information and evidence that was suppressed. And she was found dead in her apartment shortly before she was supposed to testify at age 26. And there's a whole thing with Dawn. It's called Justice for Dawn.
Wow.
justicefordawn.com. It's the craziest story ever. And there's definitely foul play involved in her death. And her family is helping us. But now, because Dawn is deceased and she thought all these cases were nonsense, and somebody inside the prosecutor's office cleaned out their office basically and gave us all kinds of information, we're on a mission to hold these people accountable, this guy Bennett and Caceres, for what they did to this young lady Dawn, and also to fulfill her mission of saying these cases are rubbish. The government knew pretty early on that what they were saying just wasn't true. And she was shocked also. She was 26 years old when she died. She was very idealistic, a brilliant young lady. And she said, wait a minute, we are intentionally imprisoning innocent people. It was just a bridge too far for her. So the sense of mission, the sense of nothing else to do, a little bit of faith that maybe this will work out. And some, my friends helping me is what turned this thing around. And we finally got attorneys appointed. Yale Law School is working on my case pro bono. And there's an attorney here in Cleveland named Kim Corral, who's actually just won a huge case yesterday, who's a real tenacious attorney. She's brilliant, but very tenacious and willing to fight the government for as long as it takes. But the bottom line here is this idea that in law enforcement, we're going to, we know Tony's guilty because we say so. So we're just going to hide evidence and destroy evidence and intimidate witnesses to, quote, win is crazy. It's crazy. I mean, we're breaking the law to win the case, and it makes sense to these folks. So we're trying to change America. We're dreaming big. We've got a petition on change.org. Let's indict the prosecutors and put them in prison. I don't know how else you stop this. I don't know how else you stop this reckless behavior. These folks feel invincible, and they can do whatever they want. And the way they treated this young lady, Dawn, before her death is a whole separate story, too convoluted for this podcast. But I mean, there's so much wrongdoing, and a prosecutor having an affair with the witness. I mean, there wouldn't be a more ridiculous or reckless or scandalous way for a prosecutor to act in front of jurors and judges. And he forgot to tell everybody, oh, by the way, this lady you're listening to is someone who I'm in a romantic relationship with. It's absolutely crazy what's going on. The level of invincibility and sort of, we know best because we're the police is scary. It's frightening. It's also destroying the country. There's so many people who shouldn't be in prison that maybe they made a mistake. Maybe they have an addiction. And there's crazy sentence disparities. Some guy gets 30 days house arrest. His co-defendant gets 30 years in prison. There's so much wrong with what's going on in America with our justice system, and that it has to be changed lest it destroy the entire country.
Wow. Tony, being in prison for 10 years, knowing that you're innocent is absolutely crazy. Can you talk a little bit about either being on the inside and what that was like, and then more so knowing that you have all of these supporters supporting you, and what was that like knowing that people are fighting on your behalf and really like want to see you get out and start an entire campaign for you to help you get out? Can you talk a little bit about the support, your family, and all those people that was involved, just really rooting for you?
Yeah, that really helped pull me through. I have a friend named Kara Bennett who lives in Buffalo. She's terrific. She created a book club. She would send in books and she would want guys to write book reports. Well, I was in jail with some pretty badass dudes that, probably hadn't written a lot of book reports in their life. But she would send pictures of herself and she would say, look, I really want to know what you think. And so she'd send these books in, and these dudes are like, man, I'm not writing some book report. How do you even do it? And I said, well, just start by saying, I like the book because, or I disagree with the book because, or I don't like the book because. So it's kind of funny. So we would send book reports to Kara. She kept sending in different books and stuff. So it was really, I mean, you can't fight your case every minute of the day. So luckily I had family and friends that sent cards and letters. When the prisons allowed it, they used to start sending it back. It's absolutely brutal in there. So, but so I had friends like Kara that help with like the book clubs and we called it her fan club. We'd have guys writing what they think, and she'd write back, and she'd send in puzzles and crossword puzzles. You're always looking for ways to kill time in there. But on I had a private investigator Bob Frederick, who never gave up on the case, who worked really hard on it. I had attorneys, pro bono attorneys. This is how unfair it is, by the way. There was a law firm named Covington that took my case for several years, and now Yale Law School. I think it's probably $3 million of free legal work. And there's still litigation going on in my case. Mm-hmm. It's not totally over yet. So it's absolutely unfair. Who has $3 million or what prisoner wouldn't want, these big fancy law schools or law firms to help? So I'm very fortunate that I was able to have so much support, and we kept building evidence over time. The government just says different things at different times. I kept filing lawsuits, and you want to make the government defend the indefensible. So I sued the prosecutor for having sex with the witness, and he said it didn't matter. So he didn't deny it. So things like that, or and the federal prosecutor, Mark Bennett, made all these false statements. For instance, they claimed that they never sent any evidence to this task force. So they never had to look at that building for evidence. And then the government kept producing receipts where the FBI would bring the evidence to where the task force. So the government's pleadings, or what they were saying, was contradicted by what? The government's own documents. So at some point, we sort of wore them down by losing. We lost, but sometimes we would win. And so the FBI agent admitted that he listened to these. There was illegal voice recordings in my case by this lady, Dawn. First, they said they didn't exist. And then they said, no, we sent them to the task force. Well, I thought they didn't exist. So we just caught them in so many lies by just being relentless. And at some point, luckily, some judge said, this is crazy. But I guess the point is, it kept me going to have friends and people out there helping. And, my friend Melanie, she would literally go to police departments and try to get public records or help me. You're really helpless in prison. It's awful. By the way, prison is supposedly, if you're guilty of something, we're going to take you away from society, take you away from your family and friends. The food sucks. But that's not how the jail officers think of it. The jail officers think you're a scumbag. We're going to torture you. I mean, I saw men that beat the crap out of these men. I saw people handcuffed and thrown downstairs. I saw a man die in prison because they changed his heart medicine and he was having a heart attack, and they told him to go lie down. I mean, the stuff that I saw in there, it's awful. It's like the worst horror movie ever. It also destroys the officers. The worst job in America is a correctional officer. So these people become totally desensitized to humanity, the inordinate power they have over people. I think it destroys their souls. The prisoners, some with life sentences, are in a better mood on a day-to-day basis than the staff, the officers that get to go home at 4 or 5 o'clock. And on a one-on-one basis, the officers would often be reasonable or polite or nice to you. But if they were in a group, they'd yell at me, Viola, what are you doing this stupid legal work for? Get this shit out of my office. Sorry for swearing on your show. But anyway, it's just an awful place to be, because it's a destruction of humanity in these prisons. Now in Cleveland, the officers that work in the county jail beat so many people up that they're afraid to go to the local restaurants. Like they go Christmas shopping 100 miles away. So I mean, who's really in jail? So the government is the taxpayers are spending money to have the government destroy people's lives and break the law while doing it. And literally, I've officers engaging in sexual misconduct in the visiting room with visitors. I mean, I'll spare you the gory details, other than to say there should be body cameras in there. There should be live streams so people could see what's going on. But we have way more people in prison in our country than anywhere else, and it's absolutely unconscionable to treat people like this as a person of faith. I believe God created everybody. So it's just as heartbreaking. I mean, I got some of that treatment too, but it's just as heartbreaking to see other people treated like that. And I do think the officers destroy their souls and destroy themselves by beating people up after they handcuff them and throwing them down flights of stairs. And I also think that it's a searing experience to go through it. And I just wish these people would leave me alone. So there was just no peace of mind ever in there. It was just you just didn't know. They would ship me to different prisons. My family didn't know where I was. Viola to the office. I'd go to the office. They'd say, pack your stuff. Where am I going? You'll find out when you get there. I'd be put in jail transit. There's something called a spit bag. They put a bag over my head. Somebody spit on an officer. I didn't, but they group punishment. Everyone's wearing a spit bag for the next 2 months, leg chains, shackles. I mean, I'm a realtor. I supposedly used paperwork that was fraudulent. Actually, our lawyer wrote it. I mean, this is crazy. Treated like a mass murderer. And so a lot of times people get out of jail in a lot worse shape than when they got in. And the other thing is, jail is an embezzlement economy. So prisoners learn to steal. I mean, unless you have family members that are willing to send you money because they charge you for everything, phone calls, emails, soap, oatmeal, everything. what happens is the prisoners learn how to steal. And of course, the officers are stealing too. So they like having prisoners steal so they can blame them. The officers would load their pickup trucks from the warehouse. You could watch them just put stuff in there. And then the prisoners would steal stuff from the chow hall or from the officers' mess and put it in their pants and try to sneak it into the unit and then sell it for stamps, which you could then trade for cigarettes. I mean, the whole thing. And how do you think the cigarettes get into prisons? I mean, the cops. So, I mean, or the drugs. I mean, the whole thing was insane. When I left, there was people using drones to bring in drugs. I mean, the stuff that was going on in these prisons is absolutely mind-boggling, and the amount of resources and money wasted on nonsense. The government shipped me from a jail in Youngstown, Ohio, to Ashland, Kentucky. Maybe it's 100 miles. It took 4 months. I think 5 different flights, 5 planes, buses, vans, holding cells, holding jails, private contractors that transport prisoners. It's just a giant make work job. It's absolutely outrageous, and it's sickening to be there. I used to feel just like this is just awful, and I would just try to get through the day. So anyway, it debases humanity, and it's awful, and the taxpayers are paying for it. You're paying. The listeners are paying for this cruelty and this rubbish.
Tony, what you just described to me sounds like you were in for murder, a drug lord,
Yeah, terrorists.
Terrorists, you name it. And you just described all of that. You said 10 years. I want to know, man, how were you able to see that, deal with that, and bounce back?
Well, one thing I can tell you is there's a camaraderie amongst the prisoners because everyone else is suffering too. And so, shocking though this may be, as much as my family and friends supported me, there was really a strength from the prisoners because only someone who's actually right next to you could truly understand. While other people could be sympathetic, they probably didn't really know exactly what was going on. So, man, I made some really good friends in there, and from all walks of life, all kinds of different backgrounds and stuff. But part of it was it creates a camaraderie of, man, this is the craziest stuff, but we're going to somehow get through it. And so part of it was that. And then part of it is I just kept saying nothing is forever. And while there were days where I thought I'd never be out of jail and this the only thing that my life would just be was prison, I kept saying nothing is forever. Things will change. We just have to get through this. But I tell you what, part of it was as I kept getting these little victories in these court filings, I thought, you know what? There's got to be light at the end of the tunnel. What's going on here is so crazy. Somebody's got to do something about this. I mean, not every single person in the government is evil. I mean, there's got to be somebody in a position of authority who's going to say, this is a bridge too far for the stuff that's gone on here. So I just having a sliver of idealism in terms of my case, the camaraderie of others, the faith, which was very helpful. And, but the thing is, I in some ways it was harder for my family. My father passed away when I was in prison. I wasn't allowed to go to his funeral because I'm a threat to the public. Supposedly, I'm going to steal your money while I'm out for 2 days or something. But I mean, in a lot of ways, this was worse on the people. I used to try to buck everyone up and say, look, you guys, I'm fine. I'm reading a lot of books. I'm working out. I'm doing push-ups. It's not the worst thing. So it was a lot harder sometimes on family and friends because they didn't know where I was sometimes, if I was being transported around or just thinking the worst was going on. So, I mean, it's just an awful experience. And I mean, I guess camaraderie with the guys in there really helped me quite a lot because they knew what I was going through because they were seeing the same thing. One guy, his family was coming in from Minnesota. I was in this prison. You had to fly to the Buffalo airport and drive 4 hours in the middle of Pennsylvania. And his family was from Minnesota, and they didn't have a lot of money. They'd saved up to fly in and stay in a hotel. And then 10 minutes before the visiting started, the warden got on and said, visiting is canceled. We found some contraband, and so that we're punishing everybody. No more visits. And so the officers liked that. I mean, they enjoyed inflicting cruelty. They just reveled in it, and it was really shocking and really hard. So not only were they hurting us, but then they're hurting families. I was in a visiting room once, and this young boy, I think he was maybe about 2 or 3, he didn't understand what was happening, why his dad was in prison. So I think they had told him that dad was working there, or dad was out of town working.
Mm-hmm.
And he just had a total meltdown in the visiting room and kept screaming, "Daddy, Daddy, tell the policeman you want to come home with me and Mommy. Daddy, you can't stay here. We want you to come home with us." And it was just awful. And so, I mean, even like a visit, which is supposed to be a nice thing, ended up being bittersweet when you see these heartbroken kids. And I just can tell you right now that our country is destroying itself with this nonsense of inflicting this cruelty on people, on families and children. And it's the worst place on earth to work. If one of my family or friends wanted to be an officer in a prison, I would try beg them not to, and I would say, I'm going to get a second job and give you the money. Don't do it. It's the worst thing ever. I've never seen more rotten, cruel, miserable people ever. And the people they were inflicting the pain on, the prisoners, were in a better mood than the officers that got to go home.
Tony, for somebody that's currently facing a unjust situation, personally or professionally, you've been there. What are some advice or life lessons, man, that you could share with them at this moment? We got plenty of listeners that listen to this podcast and could potentially having a family member facing some unjust situation. What's some stuff that you could share with them, man?
Okay, well, for what it's worth, here's what I think. You have to take a situation and you have to look at it honestly. You have to take a step back, look at it honestly, and make a determination. Is it a good fight to engage in? So I'm not advocating that everybody just automatically engage in some epic battle, no matter what. If I thought I did something wrong in our business, I would have pled guilty and said, I'm sorry. I'm not the first guy to make a mistake. I thought I was innocent. Well, I know I'm innocent, and now we proved it in a trial. But I just said, this is a fight that I'm going to have. So the first thing I think you got to do is make a decision. Yes, I'm going to fight, or no, I'm not. And it's okay to say I'm not going to fight, whether it's a criminal case or a business situation or a personal situation. Sometimes you just move on and you just call it a day. Maybe you bought a rental house and it didn't work out. It's okay. I mean, I'm not saying dig in and persevere no matter what. I don't think that's a good bit of advice. So I guess the first thing is fundamentally say, let's look at the situation. Should I fight or not? Yes or no. If you think you should, I still don't think you're at that point of fighting just yet, because then you got to say, am I right? And how can I resolve the situation favorably? Or what does victory look like? Before you get into some epic battle that takes on, like in my situation, taking on a life of its own now, you have to say, well, wait a minute. Okay, can we win? Because you know what? Life isn't fair. And sometimes things happen that are unfair. So one, is this a good fight to have? Should I do it? And then two, what am I sure that I should fight? And am I willing to really engage in an epic battle and kind of sketch out what does, quote, victory look like? So, you know, when you can declare victory and call it a day. The other thing, too, is that while we've had success, there's also, just like in our business career, this nonsense with the criminal justice system is a lot of good old-fashioned hard work. It's a lot of interviewing witnesses and making records requests and meeting with our lawyers and meeting with the investigators and buying transcripts from the trial. And so there's a lot of work involved in this. And that also is interesting because you have to, A, decide you're willing to do it, but B, preparation is a huge advantage. If you're in a battle, the government prosecutors are generally lazy. They're very powerful. They bully people into pleading guilty. They already destroyed everything I work for. Mm-hmm. The old saying is, if you take everything away from a man has nothing to lose. So I'm all fired up. They've lost interest in it. The one guy's Mark Bennett's being disbarred. So you can outwork these people. I mean, think of the Vietnam War, okay? The United States had air superiority, naval superiority. We had the highest technology. We had communication superiority. We lost. Okay, the government can be defeated, but you've got a big opponent like that. You've got to have a strategy for how can you defeat a well-financed or a powerful opponent. So I guess to summarize, one, think about, is the fight worth having? Two, think about how to emerge victorious from the fight. And three, what's all involved with that? How much work, how much money, how much time? And then make an assessment if it's something that you really want to do. In my case, I will say, and this is in many situations, there's really no reason to fight a little bit. I mean, either you do it all the way, which is a big commitment and involves personal sacrifice, or don't do it at all. So I've seen the prosecutors in the Justice Department, there was really nothing they weren't willing to do. There was nothing that they said, whoa, that's a bridge too far. We've got destruction of evidence. We've got the death of this Dawn Pasella. We've got the prosecutor having an affair. We've got witness intimidation. I mean, there was nothing that they said, whoa, that's a red line we're not going to go over. So I guess the point is, if you're going to engage with an opponent like that, you really have to say, I'm going to do this all the way, not just a little bit. There's nothing wrong with saying I'm not going to engage in a battle. I just think people need to think about it up front rather than racing into some epic struggle, because it's a life-changing event. And in this criminal nonsense, this has gone on for almost 15 years at this point. So I wouldn't wish it on anybody. But at this point, we're close to final victory, and we're just going to see it through, especially since others are helping and really leading the charge. I'm almost in the backseat now, letting these lawyers and investigators and some of these criminal justice groups take charge. So those are some thoughts that may or may not help, but you have to make a decision, an active decision about, is it worth it or not? And what does victory look like before you get into something?
Absolutely. And a high level of commitment, man. So, Tony, you spoke a good bit earlier when we were starting about how you got through your circumstance. Can you talk about the role of faith and how that played a significant role in enduring all of these challenges and just maintaining your hope?
Sure. I was raised Catholic. I'm from a big Italian family, and I'm happy to share my thoughts, not meaning to impose it on anyone. I'm respectful of all people's, if they're believers or non-believers or other religions. But I was raised Catholic, and sadly, suffering is part of the human condition, and God gave us free will. So if I want to walk down the hall of the apartment building I live in and punch the girl at the end of the hall, I mean, I have the free will to do it. I don't want to do it. God forbid I do it, but I could. So that means that because we have free will, people can engage in actions that are hurtful towards others. So I just sort of had the realization that I'm not the only person that this has gone through. And Jesus suffered, and the Bible has stories of suffering. And so I just was able to have some perspective on it, that nothing is forever, that the Lord is watching over us. The Lord gives people going through unfair circumstances extra strength and compassion. I was very fortunate that we were able to have services. If a priest could come in, that was great. If not, we would just do it ourselves. We literally had a white tablecloth, and we just put it on this table, and that was our altar, and we would read together. When two or three are gathered in his name, the Lord is present, from the Bible. So I was able to draw strength from that, but also draw perspective from that nothing is forever, and that other people have so suffered. And why we suffer is because we have free will, and that means that bad things can happen too. So I guess with that sort of is my sort of the way I had my outlook on life. The other thing too, a priest told me in prison that was true. He said, Tony, I know you don't like being here, but you can do good things here. You can help others. There was men that hardly knew how to read and write, and I was very fortunate to have educational opportunities that many others didn't. Let me tell you, I'd go sit in the law library at the one jail. The joke was that Tony has office hours on Saturdays. Guys would just come in. Hey, I got this letter. Can you read it to me? They got a letter from a family member, and then they would say, well, man, I'd love to write them back. I said, well, good. I have a typing ribbon. We have typewriters in the prison. Let's do it. So the guy would just say what he was on his mind, and I was just typing it. And I would just say, hi, I'm Tony. I'm helping my friend type because I'm in the law library. Just, you could be a little humble and help others. There was guys that had like some traffic ticket or something, and then they got arrested, and they never went to court, and they had this warrant, and we could write the judge and try to get it removed. We would do reentry type things to help. The friends of mine like Melanie and Kara that helped me, they also were willing to look up stuff for other guys. Even though the prison officers are supposed to do this, they don't help anybody. So we used to look up stuff for somebody, ask the child support order be held, in abeyance while they're in prison, send that information, things like that would really try to help guys while they were in there. So even though the circumstances were unfair, you could still be nice. You could still do things for others. So, and then fighting my case and try to be a nice guy with others, it gave life purpose. It was a reason to get up every morning and try to contribute. So the faith helped me quite a lot, and it helped pull me through the darkest times. And I'm very
Absolutely.
grateful. Faith is a gift for any of those of you who are folks of faith. Just remember that your faith is a gift from the Lord, and that not everybody has that gift. So, I'm grateful for my faith.
Most definitely. Tony, your website was started pre Tony Viola, and I know that it created a significant movement with leading a charge. And I know that you're super, super big on legal accountability so far listening to this conversation. Can you talk a little bit about your movement? What do you have going on right now? And just that level of community that you're creating in regards to all of these things that you've seen with some injustice going on that happened to yourself as well too.
Well, let me just, yes, I can answer that, but let me give you a little background on Dawn Pasella. So Dawn was the office manager for the prosecutors. And once they realized that I didn't own these companies, they thought, and the indictments were riddled with these errors, they thought they could lose the case. And this was supposedly the nation's largest mortgage fraud case. It had been widely reported in local and national media. So the prosecutors, Bennett and Caceres, took this extraordinary step of having this lady pretend she was a paralegal working with defense lawyers. And so we actually had a government spy, so to speak, in our defense, pretending to be helping us prepare for trial, while actually recording us. This is a crime, by the way, that the prosecutor's office, the Justice Department, is committed. And they've admitted this without real consequence yet. But anyway, Dawn felt what she was doing was wrong. And she also was aware that the government was hiding evidence. And so she came forward to help me. But Dawn told me something that was very important, which is, Tony, none of the evidence that I'm going to give you that you should hopefully win your second trial, none of the evidence is specific to Tony. If you're accused of tricking banks into making these no money down loans and you're supposed to go to jail, 1,100 other people by this task force were prosecuted on the same theory. So if you're innocent, then everyone else is, maybe everybody's innocent or many people are innocent. There's a lot of issues. And she also knew about this affair with the prosecutor and this witness named Catherine Clover. And the government was using this witness in these cases over and over again because she would say what they wanted at grand juries and in criminal trials. So this is outrageous. I mean, this is absolutely crazy. So, but I guess the point is, Dawn told me, I'm going to help you win your case. You're going to get out of jail, and we've got to get these other cases reopened. And I said, fine, we're going to open up a little office somewhere. We'll get a coffee pot and a whiteboard and a couple of computers, and we'll work on this and clear these cases up. So Dawn had sort of created this mission of, Tony, I want to help you. You're being wronged, but other people are too. And so this is bigger than just a one-off wrongful conviction where like DNA evidence exonerates one dude. Let's get all these cases reviewed. So that mission, even though Dawn passed away under very suspicious circumstances, we're trying to get a new investigation into what happened, and that's at justicefordawn.com. But that mission of, a lot of people were harmed. And a lot of people had their lives destroyed and their families destroyed. And in these mortgage cases, the government ordered people to pay millions of dollars of, quote, restitution to the innocent bank. And then the government's taking this money and using it as a slush fund and buying laptop computers and hotel rooms and police cars or whatever, and not actually sending it to the supposed victims. So there's so much misconduct and so much proof of it that I think our mission is this. I mean, what's done is done. I can't undo what happened to me, but the only way to stop this from happening to others, which we don't want this to ever happen again, including to Dawn Pacella's family, which are totally devastated, is to have accountability. Now, we maybe can't really have justice for Dawn because she's not alive, but we could have accountability. And prosecutors who break the law because they don't feel like admitting they're wrong need to go to jail. I don't know what else to tell you. We have to take away this idea of immunity, where if you have a certain job, you can do crazy stuff and you can't be sued. And these people are so pompous. I mean, they're so arrogant. They talk about the rule of law, and they used to, like this guy Bennett, Mark Bennett for the United States of America. And he used to say that the United States of America wants Tony Viola immediately imprisoned, remanded to immediate custody. The United States of America wants the fullest prosecution, the fullest extent of the law. United States this, United States that. So these prosecutors and police wrap themselves in the American flag, which is ridiculous because they're engaged in misconduct and criminal activity. So in my case, they started off by saying that I own a mortgage company, and I didn't own a mortgage company. And the fact that there was no evidence that I ever got a penny from mortgage companies or owned mortgage companies The lack of evidence actually convinced these idiot law enforcement officials that I must be guilty because I had taken extraordinary steps to hide that somehow I owned a mortgage company, even though they could never show me getting any money or have anything to do with the mortgage company. So this is insane. So you have to drive accountability into the prosecutor's office and say, you know what, you guys, yeah, okay, fine. I'm not saying every single person in jail is innocent. And I get we got to prosecute people, but you got to do it in accordance with the law. Breaking the law to win the case is crazy. Threatening to put people's children in foster care because they're not telling you what you want to hear.
Yeah.
Destroying evidence, hiding FBI reports, destroying computers, forging Dawn's names on the evidence log. I mean, this is
Very unethical practices.
It's a crime spree inside the prosecutor's office. And the judges are all former prosecutors. By the way, let me just tell you, court's fair. They all work in the same building. They all go to lunch together. Mark Bennett used to play poker with judges on Thursday night. The prosecutor and the judge are playing poker. Now, they didn't invite me to poker games. I mean, I would go. I mean, the whole thing just shows you how incestuous and how corrupt it is. But they have this insular view that you're guilty because we say so. And so you're a criminal. So if we have to take extraordinary tactics and destroy some evidence and hide some documents and play games to, quote, win, that's all in a day's work. And so what's happening is this is just completely insane to have all these innocent people in prison. And you see these exonerations all the time. Our lawyer, Kim Corral, just got a guy out yesterday. But, I mean, for every one that gets out, I mean, many of it goes uncorrected. And I happen to have a really long sentence, so I was working on it. But there's a lot. If I had a 5-year jail sentence or a 7-year jail sentence, I mean, these things take decades to undo sometimes, which is insane. So, really, to change the country, we want to make history and put these prosecutors in prison. I don't know what else to do, not out of hatred or vengeance, but to say, look, you got to be accountable. And when you break the law, it doesn't matter that you're a police or a prosecutor. You should be treated more harshly than a normal criminal. These people are sworn to uphold the law, and they're acting on behalf of the public. They're public servants, these police and prosecutors. It's not like a realtor. Like I was a realtor. I don't walk around with the power of the government. I can't, arrest anybody or anything. But these guys do. They have the power of the country. So the government is destroying the people and it's destroying the country. And there's this great schism between law enforcement, the bubble that they're in, and everybody else. So we hope to contribute. It's a hard and challenging cause, but we're trying to think big and try to change it. Can't undo what was done to me. I mean, I don't want money. I mean, a lot of times people are wrongfully in prison. I want the prosecutors to go to jail. I had a successful business. I made money before. I just want this to stop. I don't want this to happen to somebody else. I don't want to buy a yacht or a Bentley or a helicopter. I want the prosecutors who brutalized people and engaged in all this misconduct. I want this to stop. And I think the way you do it, you make an example out of them, just like a prosecutor would say. We prosecute criminals for deterrence to make an example out of people. Well, let's do it to them and see how they like it.
Accountability. Tony, as we get ready to wrap up, man, and get out of here, if anybody wanted to work with you, support you, get you to speak with them or get on a podcast or anything like that, how can they get a hold of you?
All my contact information is on freetonyviola.com. So reach out or call anytime. If anybody had a similar case and they were prosecuted unfairly and we can help, all the information we have is available. We'll share it. Our investigators and attorneys are willing to talk to anyone if you think we can be helpful. If people want to submit leads to us, they can do so in their own name or anonymously. That's fine too. If you want to help, how can you help? We don't want any money from anybody, but what you could do is sign up for our email alerts. You could sign a petition on change.org. All that's linked on the Free Tony website. You can share our website on your social media post. You can join the Justice for Dawn Pasella group on Facebook by putting Dawn Pasella, Pasela, in the search bar, or go to justicefordawn.com. It's linked there. Uncovered.com, the largest cold case operation in the country, is also helping with Dawn's case. You can follow Dawn's case there. You could sign up. If you are a sleuth or a detective or an investigator, or you have investigative experience, we really need a hand with Dawn's case. So the police are refusing to investigate. They're protecting their buddies, but we're doing it on our own and uncovering and cracking the case ourselves. So if anybody has any thoughts or ideas, if anyone wants to be a guest blogger on our website, they're welcome to do it. If there's a story that you want to share, we can try to help amplify, just like what you're doing, Michael. We want to help amplify stories as well. So call, text, email anytime. We try to respond to everybody. This is a cause much bigger than ourselves. It's not about, Tony the realtor wants to go be a realtor again. I don't think people are going to riot in the streets because I'm not a realtor. I think the issue is this improper conduct by law enforcement officials. It's brazen and it's reckless. And that's the thing, because these guys took no steps to hide any of their misconduct. I mean, we have just an amazing documentary evidence of absolute wrongdoing. So we want it to stop in America. And so thoughts, suggestions, ideas, tips, any of it is welcome and appreciated. And we thank you for allowing me to share this story with your listeners.
Tony, it's been an absolute pleasure. I listened to your story, man, and it's remarkable, man. Some of the things that I could not even imagine, and you've been through it, and now you're here trying to help people. So I just want to tell you, thank you for coming on, sharing your story, being transparent, being vulnerable, and just helping making an impact on for our listeners as well. I know that this story is going to resonate with many people, man. So thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you. It's great to be with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Until next time, guys. God bless.
Can't complain at all. Couple dollars in my pocket, no income and go. Been working on my body, getting healthier. Thank God for clarity.